Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Thursday night in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, today on September 22nd marks the fall equinox for the Northern Hemisphere. And just a reminder, equinox means equal night. It's kind of neat on this satellite image, which is the sun's about to set on Hurricane Fiona here. The day-night line runs perfectly north-south across the planet. And then today, the sun is rising down here on the South Pole, where it'll be up for the next 6 months. It is setting on the North Pole, where we'll be down for the next 6 months. And everywhere on Earth, except for the poles, has 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. Now, let me just show you throughout the day today something kind of neat. What we call this right here on the satellite imagery is called sun glint. Okay, so that's basically where the light from the sun is bouncing off of the ocean surface. You can even see the sun glint going across parts of the tributaries to the Amazon. See it right in through there? Now, what's neat about that is where that sun glint is, the middle of it actually traces out the exact location of the equator, because the satellite taking this image is sitting directly above the equator, and the sun's rays are perpendicular to the equator today. So that little line, you see it right there, kind of traces out where the equator is located. You can see a really good reflection off of this tributary to the Amazon. Now, before we talk about these tropical systems, I just want to note that the next one that just came off of the coast of Africa's got a lot of dust in it. Can you see that? But the two big systems we're keeping an eye on is first Fiona, which is a Category 4 strength that's moving toward Bermuda. I'm going to miss it just to the west. And then this right here is this group of tropical thunderstorms we're calling AL98. That's just the name that's assigned to it while we investigate it to see where it's going to go. So first, let's go take a quick look here at Fiona. Excuse me. So Fiona still with 130 mile an hour winds is a Category 4 strength system. It's going to miss Bermuda to its west. But that will put the strong winds, which are on the right-hand side of any northern hemisphere hurricane, over the top of Bermuda. What's been very interesting, I don't know if that's the right word, but very interesting to watch this week is how this upper level trough that's going to be diving here into the northeastern part of the United States. It's the same trough that brought in the frost into North Dakota this morning, the one that's going to bring the frosty temperatures into, well, that's a little too far north, but into northern Wisconsin and the UP tomorrow morning. It's going to pull this right here on into Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and eastern parts of Quebec. So we're going to have to watch Fiona carefully for the Canadian Maritimes, but it's the system that follows it that has, of course, grabbed a lot of our attention. Again, it's called AL98, and what you're seeing right now is that the National Hurricane Center is giving this one a 90% chance of developing here over the next few days. It is forecast to go right here to the south of Jamaica, and we're going to keep a close eye on that. So let's go to the latest 12Z updates from the European and the GFS, looking at the forecast tracks of these systems. So they have yet to form. Well, this one has yet to form. And what we can see is that the European model is really favoring a turn after it goes south of Jamaica late this weekend. And then by early next week, 5 days from now, it's expected to go over Cuba and kind of hit Florida from the south. Now, there is still quite a large spread here in the European ensemble forecast, but can you generally see how the forecast members are attempting to take this into Florida from the south and then possibly run it along the coast? I'll talk more about what this might mean here in just a few seconds. Now, the big difference between the European and the GFS is that the GFS is attempting to take the same circulation farther to the south of Jamaica and then right through the Yucatan Straits. And if that's the situation, this would eventually then get into parts of the Gulf of Mexico, really putting a large part of the Gulf Coast at risk. At this particular stage, this section of the country doesn't want to see another drop of rain, given where we are with cotton harvest, where we are with crops finishing here. To bring in a hurricane would be exceptionally disruptive with this. I have been and have always favored the European model when it comes to tropical cyclone tracks, and it'll be very important for us to watch the evolution of the GFS this week and to see if it continues with this more southerly and westerly track or if it kind of comes in better alignment with the European model, which has been very consistent at doing this. Okay, so we're still honestly in a bit of a wait and see mode. What I will be waiting to see is the behavior of the mid-level winds in the atmosphere with respect to both systems. And one great way to look at that is to look at a graphic of vorticity. So these are all regions colored here of positive vorticity. That's where the air is spinning cyclonically, which is counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. So watch what happens to Fiona first. So here's Fiona. You can see the spin in it. And as it moves north toward Bermuda, this deeper trough here is going to grab it. and just going to pull it back around. So the large scale spin around the trough is like this. And that's actually going to take Fiona from here and just pull it on around. So two entirely different size scales of systems, the hurricane being substantially smaller than the deep extratropical wave. So that pulls that right there into the Canadian Maritimes. While that's going on, there is this other shortwave behind it that was once in California that's moved over parts of Idaho and into Montana. That's going to be moving through the northern plains this weekend, and it's going to bring a front through that's going to give us some precipitation here. This was the same system that brought all the heavy rain to northern California, also the one that brought the severe weather yesterday into parts of Idaho, and it's going to be moving into the central part of the country, just kind of spreading rain across this area. I'll show you that in detail in a moment. What's very, I don't know if it's disturbing is the right word, is what happens after that. So as we go into early next week, can you see what the pattern's doing? The flow of the jet stream is really taking on this highly amplified look to it. So warmth will come back to the west, dryness will come into the midsection of the country. But this is where the European model is putting that tropical system. And what I'm going to be watching here is as we play this forward, what ends up occurring here is we have this kind of wave breaking action on this side, which means we're going to get some flow like this. This will be the flow through the trough. And there's another ridge over here, which means there's going to be flow coming around like this. So it's almost as though this hurricane kind of sits in a saddle point, if you will, between these three things. And it'll probably try to stay in the middle of that. Now, could this ridge be the most dominant piece to the flow, the one over here? Sure. And it could grab it and pull it in this direction. But watch what happens after that. So keep your eye down here on this next tropical system coming over Cuba. It too gets, according to the latest European run, pulled into another shortwave trough over New England. And just like the previous one with Fiona, what's left of that tropical system gets pulled into the Canadian Maritimes. So that could be twice that the Canadian Maritimes get hit with the remnants of tropical systems. Okay, right now, today, let's just get a good look at these two pieces. This is the large front that swept through New England yesterday, bringing in all the cold air behind it. That is helping to keep Fiona away from the U.S., but it's also the piece that's going to take this and wrap it up here into the Canadian Maritimes, So Newfoundland, Nova Scotia, and this part of Quebec. This is the deeper upper level low that had come out of California that you can see today is now pulling here. It's got a new update there, pulling through parts of Montana. And in between, we have a front linking all of this up. So you can kind of see how all these pieces are kind of working together here. So some moisture coming through the four corner states, the front sagging through the midsection of the country, and the low that's following it. So what we end up getting out of this is going to add to the rainfall map you see here. So just in the last 3 days, this moisture was from the leftovers of that upper level low that's now over Montana. It's the one that brought some strong to severe storms into this area yesterday. This has been the surge of tropical moisture that's come up through Arizona and New Mexico, meeting up with the front again. So we're going to get more rain on top of what's been just, a much needed rainfall event into parts of Kansas and Nebraska and Colorado, given the winter wheat in this area. We've seen severe weather, including hail in parts of Wisconsin and into Michigan, and stronger storms in the eastern Corn Belt into New England as well. But we've been very dry from Texas all the way over to the Carolinas with this particular pattern. Now, given that, I want to show you where we've been so far for this month. So this is a month-to-date precipitation, total precipitation ranks by climate map. By climate district map. So you can see that this area has been quite dry, whereas that upper level low in California has made the statistics very high for California. What's going to be changing with this particular map as we go forward is going to be a lot more regions going over dry, except for those regions that are going to be seeing the tropical system potentially impacting. So I'm talking about here, all right? So this map here is looking at the latest 40 centimeter or 16-inch soil moisture data. And when we compare this in a moment to the forecast for upcoming rainfall, you're going to see that a lot of places that have been a little drier are going to continue on that, which means good harvest effort overall. But this is an area we're just going to have to keep a close eye on throughout fall to see if moisture is going to return to these places. So what we're going to look at next here is our 15-day outlook in terms of precipitation anomalies. And overall, because of the position of the jet stream, which is going to be building into a larger ridge over the west, in other words, doing something like this, and then diving down into the Great Lakes area, we just get a lot of convergent flow here in the upper levels of the atmosphere. That tends to produce higher pressure and drier conditions. Okay. Now, again, down here, this is all kind of wild card because we don't yet know, even though the European model favors this track on AL98, which could be named Hermine, there is still the possibility that this gets into the Gulf and then possibly impacts somewhere along the Gulf. So I just want to kind of put that caveat in there as we're thinking about this. Now, I'm going to come back to the details of the next 2 weeks, but I always like to cover the long range pretty close to the front of these videos. So this is what I'll be watching. This great diagram here, this comes from the University of Albany, our State University of New York at Albany, shows us the position of the Pacific jet, and we're just going to have to watch this carefully with time. So we have 4 quadrants: the equatorward shift, the poleward shift. So this is south versus north position. This is the retracted position over towards Japan, and this would be the extended version over toward the Gulf of Alaska. As of late, the jet stream's been more of an equatorward shift and been weak. It's been stuck over by Japan, but there are some indicators that it's going to start to move and maybe shift a bit farther to the north and pick up some speed and move farther across the open Pacific Ocean. And I think that's going to coincide with a couple of other events happening in the tropics. Now, you know, we've been talking about La Niña as having another resurgence this fall before possibly fading in winter, and I'll cover that again at the end of this video. But you see that as we finish September and start October, we're going right back to where we were. Look at how strong these trade winds are. They're screaming in this direction. What about the winds coming out of the Indian Ocean? That's those westerly wind bursts. And this is really going to impact where the MJO is going. It's possibly going to give us a stronger MJO Phase 5 look. And as that occurs, you see how the MJO, which has been in here for so long, that's why I haven't been talking about it. There are some indicators that the MJO is going to break out over the next couple weeks into Phase 5. Now, as long as these trade winds remain like this, we could see that MJO Phase 5 look to the flow of the atmosphere. And it is an unblocked look. So you're now looking historically at when we've had a La Niña and the MJO has been in Phase 5. And what it tends to favor is, well, what you don't see is any big ridges north of troughs. So the troughs are here, the flow comes in. The trough is here, it goes across the open Atlantic. The trough is here, the flow comes off of Japan. So this tends to give us a more progressive pattern. It tends to get systems moving. But I think we're another 10 to 15 days away from getting the jet stream to give us this look. So where all of this leads us to is the latest outlook from the European model for the month of October. Now, overall, you see that much of the eastern 2/3 of the country is favored dry, but we're starting to see these signals of increased precipitation in the northwest, and that's very characteristic of La Niñas to deliver early rainfall to the northwest. In fact, if I let this 30-day sliding window go out now into the beginning of November, you've now seen how much more aggressively the models have gone over wet. What I think is going on here is that the models are initially for October picking up on the next 2 weeks, and they're kind of stuck on that. That's why, if I take you back there, this outlook looks very similar to our next 15 days. But that look that you see here going into November would suggest more frequent systems coming across the United States, and that would be the case where the MJO really favors this trough position that comes out and ejects like this. That's not a cold pattern, but it is one that delivers a lot more systems with a higher momentum Pacific jet. Okay, that's the story that I think I'm telling here with the latest data that now takes us out to the beginning of November. So if I guess my point is, if harvest windows are opening now, we need to take advantage of them early because they might start to slow down and shut down a bit once we get into the middle of October. That's the mainstay of that story there. Okay, let's now come back to what we're dealing with today. This is where we have Fiona. That is Gaston. This is AL98. This is Newton. And this is the high pressure cell that brought in that much colder air. Some places here 20 to 30 degrees colder than they were over the last couple of days. Now, as this high pressure cell sat over North Dakota this morning, it delivered some pretty chilly air. There was some patchy frost in North Dakota this morning. It's going to be moving its way over like the UP in Michigan and northern Wisconsin for tomorrow morning. But behind it, some relatively stronger winds came out of the south, which have really revived the temperatures. So the wind advisories here were for the winds I just showed you, but now you can see the frost and freeze warnings that are for parts of northern Wisconsin, northern Michigan, getting here into the UP of Michigan. So that's kind of the setup in the near term. Let's go take a look at what the rainfall is going to do. I'm just going to show you the main pieces. One front cleared. We have the colder air behind it. So, I mean, in middle of winter, this would all be lake effect snow, by the way, but we're nowhere near that, of course. We just want to watch where this low links up with the front that's still draped across the midsection of the country. So going into tonight and into tomorrow morning, that low emerges, and there's just a band of showers and storms out ahead of this through tomorrow morning, mostly just scattered rain showers. Then we get into Friday night, and we see that throughout much of Minnesota, getting into Wisconsin and Iowa, there's going to be some scattered showers. Same thing from southern Illinois back to the Panhandles. There could be an area right in through here seeing some scattered rain. As we play into Saturday, that low just kind of moves its way over the Great Lakes. And that's where it'll be by the time we get to Saturday evening. So from there, what I want to do is I want to give you both models, but I don't want to show them side by side. I want to show them one at a time. So we've already seen through Saturday morning into Saturday evening. So let's pick this up on Sunday morning. Now the flow at this time is doing this. So you're going to see lots of showers getting wrapped around here, but very dry to the west of that. Take a look. Monday, Tuesday, and by Tuesday evening, according to the European model, that will be the point when we see what could be named Hermine move over Cuba and come into southern Florida. Now remember, this is one run suggesting it's going to be there. But as we watch that one run continue, it could grab a hold of the deeper trough in New England and pull that system, just like you see there, along the east coast and into Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and eastern Quebec. But behind that, you didn't see a whole lot going on across much of the rest of the country. Maybe some showers in the Four Corner states, and there's a low midweek next week coming into this part of the Pacific Northwest. Now the question is, does the GFS see the same thing? So let's just play through and start here on Sunday morning. So there's the deeper trough in the east and the showers that go around it. Now remember, we had a major difference in the position of what could be Hermine next Wednesday. The GFS has it here coming through the strait. And at the same time, there's still the deeper trough, but it's progressed farther to the east. And that low that I mentioned coming into the northwest is still there as well. So many of these components still fit. But the difference here is in the position of this ridge. And the flow around it it's just at this point going to help push what could be named Hermine back to the back to the west. So the GFS model, the operational one, brings us over Alabama. And I just want to be very clear here. We do not know what this is going to do. The system hasn't even formed yet. We're just looking at model information. Now, beyond that, this is what I really want to establish with you. If that system does follow the European model track, most of the country for the next 10 days is relatively dry, less than a half inch of rainfall. This is the probability of less than a half inch of rainfall, okay? So it's all going to be the wild card of that tropical system that really is going to change the forecast. We also note this, as we get out there past next Wednesday into Thursday and Friday, the end of the month, the jet stream behavior is really just favoring troughing here, which we talked about being common when we have a La Niña pushing the MJO to phase 5. So what this really is kind of advertising to me is no deep cold air to start the month of October, but systems will likely be going across the northern tier of the United States. And the reinforcement of these troughs just kind of keeps that going. But at this point, remember, most of next week is dominated by ridging in the midsection of the country. So what we end up getting is a drier look here. This is wet simply because the ensembles are picking up on what could be named Hermine. So it's beyond this point that these troughs keep forming, sending more systems across the northern tier of the United States. But they're not really tapping into really deep cold air for the front part of October. So that's why if we missed the frost this morning, and there was some patchy frost in parts of North Dakota this morning, that's what this map is showing, that after the frost event you see coming in tomorrow into Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and then eventually the day following here in parts of New England, then we're going to go a while without, I think, seeing a frost risk. If we look at the high temperatures, we've already seen these today. Watch the warmth already begin to rebuild back in the midsection of the country into Saturday. That's when the first trough, the one that grabs onto Fiona, moves through New England. But there's a reinforcing shot of colder air coming through on Sunday into Monday and Tuesday, and that's the second wave that comes through that could influence the path of Hermine, if that's the name that it eventually gets. And during this whole time, though, the west starts to see a rebound in temperatures. So beyond that, let's just watch a 5-day sliding window of temperatures as we finish this month of September and now get into the beginning of October. Because the jet stream doesn't favor any deep penetrating troughs in the Canadian prairie, we just see more mild weather for the start of October, which means if we miss a frost, if you missed a frost in the northern tier of the United States yesterday or the day before, and then tomorrow on Friday, then I think you're going to buy another 10 plus days before we consider having another one again. Now, from here, I want to give you some international things to think about and some long-range things to think about, because the monsoon is fully established and going. What's going on right now in South America is that there's quite a bit of cooler air south. Over the next 5 days, if you take a look at these two maps, we see that there's a cold front advancing here, and quite a bit of cold air coming out into southern Brazil, out of Paraguay, Uruguay, and Argentina, and it's still there in the day 5 through 10. Now, from this point, the big question is, if the monsoon has started, and we've been looking all week long about the high probability of getting a couple of inches of rain in here, does it just continue to go? Some of the latest evidence we've got suggests that it does. So as we play this out, we just continue to see that if there's drought stresses, they're south. Argentina's been drier, it's been colder. We've seen some problems in Uruguay and also in parts of Rio Grande do Sul, and even playing out there to the beginning of November. All indicators here are that the monsoon's coming on early and is expected to be wet north. So this is going to be a faster plant in parts of the northern growing areas. Now, a lot of what we've just talked about really lies on La Niña doing what it's been doing. And there is still that evidence coming from the latest updates from the CFSV2 that the La Niña is going to probably bottom out in November, and then maybe in December, January, February start to fade. The models continue to show that. I want to back this up with a multi-model analysis of this. So let's go look at the Australians, the Canadians, the Europeans, the Japanese, the British, the United States, and the French. The French and the British. Sorry, I got those backwards. And what we're going to see is going from October into November, they must all have La Niña strengthening. And then in December, January, and February, they have it backing off. And interestingly enough, the one agency that typically has its finger really on the pulse of a La Niña, which are the Australians, they're actually calling for fully neutral conditions by February. So there are still some of these long-term indicators that this La Niña will fade once we get past maybe the front half of winter. From there, what I'd like to show you is what should we expect until then. So if we've seen October, what about November through January? Well, if we keep the cooler ocean temperatures around and we look at the correlation with precipitation, the blues indicate where we expect to have above normal precipitation. And the warmer colors are where we expect to have the drier conditions. So this would be the front half of our cold season in North America. If we flip this over and say, well, show us the temperature correlations with those ocean temperatures, this is what we get. Now, I know this is a little confusing, and I wish I could just flip the color so it would make more sense. But because right now in Niña region 3.4 of the ocean's cold, or we have a La Niña, the warmer colors are actually where there's the cooler bias. And the cooler colors are where there's the warmer bias. So we tend to be warmer across the southern tier of the United States and cooler across the north, cooler than average. So that means this winter may come on quick and be cool to start because of La Niña and possibly make a switch midway through this. Now, speaking of that, let me show you what the latest updates are from the CPC. Their forecast guidance for temperatures December, January, and February are very La Niña looking. Cold intrusions in the north, warmer from the southwest into the southeast, but plenty of shots of colder air early in the season. They also have this outlook for precipitation. But remember, December, January, February, we still expect the La Niña-like behavior in the atmosphere. So that tends to mean the jet stream comes in and then ejects. So it's an active Ohio River Valley storm track, wetter in the Pacific Northwest, drier from California to Texas into the southeast. But take a look at this. Because the models are ending this La Niña at some point in winter, the spring forecasts are now beginning to advertise a pattern that has more of a subtropical component to the jet stream. So that means more normal precipitation to finish winter in the west, especially California. And then if the jet stream favors systems coming over the southern Rockies, it just opens the Gulf wide up, meaning we could really work hard on the drought issues that are still in parts of the southern plains, and this could give a very good start to winter wheat in Kansas should this manifest itself like that. So I want to give you that update as I kind of wrap up today's video for the longer range, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks.